Welcome to Reformed Thinking, the deep dive that cuts straight to the core of what matters.
Today we are opening up the sources on Psalm 15, and this is one of the scriptures that presents a really practical and searching question.
It really gets right to the point. What kind of person is fit to stand in God's presence?
It's a question that echoes through the entire Bible, really.
Our source material for this is, well, it's compelling. We're drawing from some very deep notes on the psalm, and most critically, from Charles Spurgeon's huge commentary, The Treasury of David.
And that gives us a very reliable lens, I think, to analyze not just the text itself, but its application.
So our mission today is pretty specific. We're aiming to extract the core knowledge about the practical qualities, the characteristics required to dwell with God.
We're tackling that one inescapable question that David asks. Who is the true citizen of Zion?
And what you get from a deep dive like this isn't, just a list of feel-good theological ideas.
No, not at all. This psalm, it sort of forces you to look in the mirror. It gives you a detailed moral and ethical profile.
A list of visible actions.
Yes, visible actions. And those actions are presented as the fruit, which has to spring from the root of divine grace. The logical connection there.
So it helps you distinguish between the sincere believer, the person who's actually doing the work,
And the person who just has a verbal and outward profession of faith. It's a necessary tool for self-examination and, sometimes a painful one.
Okay, so let's unpack the historical setting first, because you're right, Psalm 15 is not an abstract poem floating in space.
No, it's tied to a really dramatic event in Israel's history.
It's highly probable that it was written in connection with the removal of the Ark of the Covenant to the Holy Hill of Zion.
Right. And that event immediately grounds this very spiritual question in a physical, tangible setting of worship and sovereignty.
That historical ground really does set the whole atmosphere for the psalm. The movement of the Ark was, it was the central religious event of David's reign.
And a political one, too. It wasn't just bringing some furniture to the capital.
No.
It was about bringing the very presence of God to the chosen location. And this is where the gravity of the question starts to build. Who gets to stand near that presence?
Historically, that was a question of, life and death.
A matter of great consequence, yes.
And we have to remember the dramatic failure of the first attempt to move the Ark. David couldn't do it.
And the sources tell us exactly why this was such a big theological lesson. The phrase used is that unauthorized persons had intruded into the office of attending to it.
That initial failure is the very reason David had to pause and really consider the question we see in Psalm 15.
It is. The sources underscore that moment, the death of Uzzah. It was a moment that made David fearful. It was terrifying.
It taught the entire nation a lesson.
It taught them that sincere intention just isn't enough when you're approaching the King of Kings. If the physical approach required such exacting reverence and, following God's specified rules,
then how much more stringent must the spiritual requirements be for someone who wants true, continuous communion with him?
Exactly. It sets a very dramatic backdrop. The question in the psalm, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? It feels like a direct response to that initial catastrophe.
David realized his approach needed to be perfectly aligned with what God required.
Indeed. The correction that followed, it required incredibly specific, divinely appointed arrangements for that second successful attempt. The sources go into detail about David's careful orchestration.
He didn't just try harder.
No, he consulted the law. The specific consecrated task of carrying the ark, which was a very public ceremonial office, was given only to the Levites.
Specifically the family of Kohath, who were set apart for this exact duty.
But I think the sources give us another detail that's maybe even more instructive. It helps us distinguish between that ceremonial role and just a quiet, practical faith.
You're talking about the care and stewardship of the ark while it was waiting.
Yes, that's it. It's a subtle but critical distinction. The ark was left for a time in the charge of Obed-Edom and his family.
And the Lord had blessed his house immensely for it.
Immensely. And crucially, the sources note that he and his sons ministered in the house of the Lord by providing for its practical care.
Yeah.
Its upkeep.
So you have two different kinds of service being validated here, which that sort of expands the scope of the answer, doesn't it?
It does. You have the Levites, who represent the strictly public, authorized ceremonial performance of duty.
And then you have Obed-Edom,
who represents the faithful, practical, everyday service and stewardship, the quiet work of the Lord done faithfully at home.
So the lesson is that whether you're involved in the grand public acts of worship, like carrying the ark,
or the quiet, persistent acts of faithful service, like caring for the instruments of worship. The requirements are the same. Preparation, reverence, and alignment with God's rules are non-negotiable.
David learned that lesson in terror.
And it's passed on to us as this list of moral credentials.
The psalm setting also brings up two specific places of dwelling in that first verse: the tabernacle and the holy hill of Zion.
And this connects directly back to the unsettling history of the ark itself.
It had a history of wandering, didn't it?
It did. It was set up in the desert, then it was at Shiloh, then it was captured by the Philistines, returned to Kirjath Jearim. It was restless. It moved from place to place until David finally secured its resting spot on Mount Zion.
And that unsettled history has a spiritual lesson for us.
It does. If the ark was a sojourner and the people of God were sojourners,
Then what does the tabernacle represent for the Christian today?
the tabernacle represents the church here on earth. Our sources describe it as a movable temple.
Because we're pilgrims who have no continuing city here.
That's it. The tabernacle is temporary. It offers shelter. It offers defense, a place to meet God, a refuge from the storm, you could say. But it's not our final home. We're just passing through.
And the holy hill of Zion, the goal of David's efforts, represents the contrast to that. It's the ultimate destination.
The holy hill of Zion is the perfect church above the heavenly Jerusalem. It signifies a place of sound and sure rest.
This is the fixed, firm, eternal home.
So the question in Psalm 15, it really has two dimensions. First, who is fit for the temporary, often turbulent fellowship of the earthly church?
And second, and maybe more to the point, who is fit for the eternal, stable security of the heavenly city?
And the answer, as we're about to see, is the same person for both.
That's a powerful way to frame the spiritual stakes here. We're not just asking about Sunday morning attendance.
No, we're asking about eternal citizenship.
Which brings us to the inquiry itself in verse 1. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the person asking the question, David, he doesn't go to the priests or the prophets for the answer.
No, he doesn't. The inquiry is posed directly to Jehovah, to the Lord himself.
And that choice, that immediately sets the tone for the depth of the introspection that's required here.
Right. Why go directly to God? Because only the infinite mind, the one who is the searcher and trier of the hearts of men, can give an answer that will truly satisfy a guilty or an unquiet conscience.
That's the point, isn't it? We can deceive ourselves so easily. And we're easily deceived by the outward appearance of other people.
All the time.
We might look at someone who talks a good game or someone who dresses right, and we just assume they're a citizen of Zion.
But only God knows the internal workings of the heart. Only he can distinguish the true resident from the mere visitor.
And the question is necessary because, as the source notes, even among those who profess faith, who appear to be part of the community,
there are still aliens from the commonwealth who lack any true secret intercourse with God. We see the external forms of worship, but the core is just missing.
So when we read, "Lord, who shall dwell in thy holy hill," we shouldn't treat that as a theoretical exercise.
No, absolutely not. We're supposed to make it a soul-searching inquiry directed at our own conduct and our own internal reality.
And when we look for the answer, the sources are clear that we have to understand it in two layers. The first layer is the primary identity.
Right. And strictly speaking, on the grounds of law, no mere man can dwell with God.
Why not?
Because the requirements listed in Psalm 15 are perfect, and no human being can claim an intrinsic holiness that perfectly meets those requirements. We all fall short.
So the first and primary answer to David's question is someone who did meet those perfect requirements.
Jesus Christ, the man of sorrows.
He's the only one whose righteousness endureth forever. He's the only perfect man who ever lived.
The absolute mirror of sincerity and holiness. His very essence satisfies the demand for a holy life. He is the standard. He's the flawless example.
This means that before we even try to apply this list of moral qualifications to ourselves, we have to recognize that our right to commune with God rests entirely outside of us.
It rests in Christ's perfect fulfillment of these criteria. That's critical. He alone possesses the wedding dress of righteousness.
And only that garment grants the right to sit at the banquet of fellowship with God.
The source material gives us a beautiful contrast here. When the world looks at the suffering servant and says, "Behold the man," the believer looks and responds by identifying the Lamb of God
as the only one whose absolute merit gains them that firm abode on Zion.
He is the blessed surety who fulfills every single law and stands accepted on our behalf.
That sets an impossibly high standard, a perfect standard. But the question also describes a derivative identity.
The sincere believer, Yes.
So what does that look like?
The good news is that the query also describes the person who is a child at home in the church of God on earth. Now, their holiness isn't intrinsic. It's not self-generated.
That is real.
It is real. It is, and this is the language used, wrought in all his people by the Holy Ghost as they are actively being conformed to his image.
I want to spend a moment clarifying this because this is where the Reformed perspective is so important. If Christ is our perfection, then the works listed in Psalm 15 are not the cause of our dwelling with God.
But they are the inevitable proof that we are dwelling with him.
That is the theological architecture. The root is grace, and the fruit is the life described in this psalm.
And that gives us the crucial distinction for our self-examination. The acceptable person is identified not by their talk, not by their profession or their opinion.
Not by what they say they believe.
Right, but by their walk, work, and word. And the sources, they pull no punches here. They assert that a mere verbal Christian is a real atheist.
That's a shocking statement. A real atheist. It pushes back so hard against, what we might call easy believism.
Or just external religiosity, it really does. It means that if your inner reality hasn't been transformed, the outer profession, it just counts for nothing in God's eyes.
God's tabernacle, according to the sources, is described as a hive for workers, not a nest for drones.
That's a great line. The sincere believer is identified as the honest and sincere doer, not the mighty talker. Their visible, measurable actions are the evidence that the Holy Spirit has actually begun and continues that vital work of conformity within them.
And if the works are absent,
Then the spiritual root is suspect.
so if the inner heart is the spring of life and the works are the visible indicator, we need to slow down and look very closely at what those indicators are supposed to be.
We do.
Okay, let's unpack this necessity of uprightness, because the credentials, they start deep within before they ever move to social interactions.
The sources begin with the internal disposition that governs everything else.
The connection between inner grace and outward action is described as organic. That's a deliberate word choice.
It is. Outward conduct is the fruit of an internal root of grace. You can't reverse the process. A person must possess a new nature, be righteous in their being, before they can consistently and sincerely perform genuine works of righteousness.
A bad tree cannot produce good fruit.
That's the principle.
Now let's look at the first qualities listed, which concern the integrity of heart and speech. Walketh uprightly and truth in his heart. What does it mean to walk uprightly?
To walk uprightly is about posture. It means maintaining an erect and honest spiritual disposition.
The source uses the image of someone on a high rope.
Right. If you lean to one side, if you lean toward compromise or wickedness, you must fall. This person avoids spiritual cringing. They avoid flattering others for gain. And they absolutely avoid having sinister aims, ulterior motives in their dealings.
That takes some real spiritual fortitude. That uprightness can't be achieved by self-discipline alone. It needs a core strength.
It requires the strong backbone of the vital principle of grace within. That inner principle, the new life given by the Spirit, is what keeps the believer perpendicular in their behavior. It's what helps them refuse to bow to temptation or worldly pressure.
It's the integrity of the soul made visible through a consistent life direction.
That's said.
And if that spiritual backbone is strong, it must necessarily come from speaking the truth in the heart. Now, this is more than just simple honesty in conversation. This is about internal reality.
This requires rejecting internal falsehoods, and those are often far more subtle than external lies.
What are we talking about here?
We're talking about eliminating double meanings, evasions, equivocations, the use of white lies to smooth over social situations and professional flatteries. The mind must become the sanctuary and refuge of truth.
So the citizen of Zion hates lying, not just on his tongue, but in his mind.
The intention must match the verbal expression. The words must be faithful interpreters of our minds. No hypocrisy is allowed.
No double-mindedness.
Absolutely none. And the sources stress a particularly severe point here about the connection between the heart and the tongue.
Which is?
There is no mortified tongue while there is an unmortified heart.
The tongue is the stream and the heart is the fountain.
That's the image. If the stream is impure, you have to look to the source. We must cleanse the fountain to purify the stream. The sources talk about a double string that ties the tongue directly to the heart, demanding strict agreement between the two.
I think we need to spend some time on the implications of that mortified tongue idea. In modern life, we're almost trained to use evasive language, to posture, to spin information. But the citizen of Zion is required to resist this completely, even when it's professionally or socially inconvenient.
That's right. A lie is a lie. regardless of its perceived size or its social function. Spurgeon speaks of the common habit of using flattery to manipulate superiors, or using equivocation to escape responsibility.
The upright heart refuses those tools.
It has to. If a man says he will do something, his heart has already resolved to do it, and that resolve carries weight. If he says he believes something, that belief must be the sincere conviction of his mind, not just a verbal performance.
And that takes courage, because the truth often offends.
It does.
Let's tie this internal machinery, the heart's integrity and the tongue's truthfulness, back to that analogy from the sources, the clock mechanism. It's such a clean way of summarizing this connection.
It is a perfect image. Think of the internal workings of a finely tuned clock. When the wheels of the clock move within, that's the heart, settled and fixed in principle by grace. Then the hand on the dial must necessarily move without.
Righteous actions, honesty, uprightness.
These are simply the visible indicators. They're the moving hands, registering the hidden internal movements of the gears that have been tuned by divine grace.
So if the hands are motionless, or if the actions are corrupt or dishonest, we know the inner works are unsound.
Precisely. To claim citizenship in Zion, you must demonstrate the synchronization between your inner and your outer self. If the heart is fixed on Christ, the life must be visibly righteous.
Moving from the inner disposition to outward conduct, the song gets highly specific. It gives us this detailed moral profile for the citizen of Zion in his everyday life.
Especially concerning his neighbors, his social circle, and his commercial interactions.
So let's start with restraint of the tongue and social malice.
The godly person shows remarkable restraint in social settings. And first, there are two related negative commands. They do not backbite.
Which is defined very strictly.
Yes. It means refusing to maliciously defame a neighbor behind their back, or spying out their defects specifically to expose them for public scorn.
So this is active malice. It's a deliberate destruction of someone's reputation.
Exactly. The backbiter is seen as extremely harmful. The source calls them the devil's bellows to blow up contention.
Wow. The devil's bellows.
It's a strong image. They are fanning the flames of discord within the community. The tongue is designed for praise and truth. But when you use it for backbiting, it becomes an instrument of hell. It undermines the very fabric of fellowship.
And a true citizen of Zion refuses to participate in that kind of spiritual vandalism.
Correct. But the psalm doesn't stop there. It demands not just that we restrain our own tongue, but that we police our own ears.
The upright person does not take up a reproach against a neighbor.
This is a harder test, I think. It means they refuse to listen to receive, or to circulate gossip or slanders that others have invented.
So if someone tries to poison your mind against a brother or sister, the citizen of Zion just shuts it down.
They do. They don't accept the poisonous tale into their ear, even if it might be interesting or, juicy.
I wonder if this is sometimes more difficult than simply not speaking ill of others. Gossip is often dressed up as concern or just sharing information.
It requires extreme vigilance. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the receiver of the gossip is viewed as being just as guilty as the person who starts the tale.
Like a thief who steals a reputation.
Right. The source provides a powerful saying. The talebearer carrieth the devil in his tongue, and the talehearer carries the devil in his ear.
So you can't escape spiritual defilement simply by being a passive listener.
To listen to a reproach is to confirm the sin and allow the contention to take root in your own mind. You become part of the problem.
So we have to be honest in what we refuse to hear. And that integrity extends to how we view and value people, which brings us to the next credential, moral valuation of character.
This credential demands a clear moral compass, one that is utterly unswayed by social status, rank, or personal wealth.
The true citizen of Zion, a vile person, is contemned.
To contemn means to look upon with contempt. But in this context, it means they do not flatter, honor, or pay respect to the wicked.
Even if that person wears gold chains, sits in high office, or is famous in the public square.
Right. This requires incredible moral courage, especially in a world where celebrity often trumps character.
It demands that we exercise moral judgment.
The sources clarify that we may respect the office if it's lawfully held, the magistracy, for example. But we do not honor the man if his character is base and vile. We have to call things what they are.
To honor a vile person is to confuse moral standards and betray the truth.
It is. Conversely, the citizen of Zion must honor them that fear the Lord.
This is the flip side of the coin.
It means showing respect and deference to the poorest, most obscure saint. It means valuing the jewels of Christian character over the setting of social status.
So if you see grace operating in a person, they're deserving of honor, even if they are in rags.
A saint in rags must be esteemed higher in your heart than a sinner in silken robes. This is the practical application of recognizing genuine authority and value.
Next, we move from social ethics to business and personal reliability, fidelity to promises.
This is a big one. The text says they are swearing to his own hurt and changeth not.
This is maybe the ultimate acid test of personal honor and integrity.
I think so. If a commitment or an engagement, even one made hastily or based on flawed projections, results in serious financial loss,
Making them maybe not the most far-seeing trader.
they must fulfill that promise regardless. They value their honor, their word, and their fidelity above any immediate profit or loss.
That is extraordinarily difficult. It speaks to a situation where a man enters a contract believing it will be profitable, but then circumstances change. And now fulfilling the contract will cause him significant personal damage.
And the modern tendency would be to look for a loophole, right? To try to renegotiate.
Of course.
The citizen of Zion resists that temptation. Their word is their bond. The promise is fulfilled because they cannot afford the spiritual cost of dishonor.
They would rather suffer financially than break faith with a neighbor.
The man who stands on the holy hill must be known for his unbending reliability.
And of course, the primary example of this radical fidelity is Jesus himself.
That connection is essential for the Christian reader. Jesus is the blessed surety. He swore to an engagement, the covenant of redemption, that resulted not just in financial loss, but in his own suffering and death.
And the sources remind us that gloriously he stood to his suretyship.
His constancy is the pattern for the believer, to be scrupulously and precisely exact in fulfilling every covenant with others.
Now we turn to economic justice and financial ethics, which are detailed in the sources as serious disqualifiers for citizenship in the Holy Hill.
Yes, the righteous person does not put out his money to usury.
We need to define this carefully because usury today doesn't just mean high interest. It means taking advantage of necessity.
That's the key. The Hebrew word is neshek, and is derived from a root that signifies to bite.
To bite.
Yes, this practice is seen as literally biting into the borrower's substance, or eating up the poor like a worm through hard timber, slowly consuming them through interest payments.
So the law is fundamentally concerned with the context of the loan, not just the interest rate.
Precisely. The law strictly forbids taking advantage of a neighbor's necessity or poverty to exact that biting interest.
So if someone is borrowing for, say, a business venture where the risks and potential rewards are high.
That's one thing. That's commercial speculation. But if a man is borrowing because his family is starving or he needs seed corn to survive the winter, the law demands mercy.
It forbids grinding poor tradesmen or needy widows under the weight of debt.
Financial dealings have to be characterized by generosity and fairness, not by ruthless exploitation.
And finally, the righteous person rejects the perversion of justice, refusing to take a reward against the innocent.
This is the rejection of bribery in all its forms. This was a loathsome and common sin, particularly in Eastern courts where judicial corruption was rampant.
Bribery perverts judgment. It condemns the innocent for personal gain.
The righteous person rejects this. They consider it too foul to touch, even if the reward is large.
And here again, the sources contrast this human corruption with the perfect justice of Christ.
That contrast, it defines the height of righteousness. Jesus, unlike a corrupt judge, instead of taking reward against the innocent, died for the guilty.
His entire life and death were an act of substitutionary justice. It reverses the whole paradigm of human corruption.
And it reinforces the idea that integrity is required across all domains, social, commercial, and judicial. You're not allowed to compartmentalize your faith away from your wallet or your interactions with the community.
That really brings the full moral weight of the psalm into focus. This isn't just about a personal prayer life.
No, it's about absolute integrity in the public square.
After listing all these comprehensive requirements, which, they touch every corner of a person's life, the psalm concludes not with a threat, but with this exhilarating promise.
A promise for the person who actually embodies these qualities.
The promise for the one that doeth these things is that they shall never be moved.
And this is a powerful declaration of security, of stability. The sources confirm this isn't just a temporary reprieve from trouble or some short-term calmness.
This is an eternal security.
Yes. The promise ensures that no storm, no trial, and certainly no judgment will ever tear them from their anchorage or drag them from their fixed foundation.
But let's clarify what never be moved means, because we know believers face suffering and uncertainty. Does this mean their circumstances are always stable?
No, the circumstances may certainly be shaken. We're still in the movable tabernacle, and trials exist. The believer may be moved or rattled for a time by external hardships or temptations or doubts.
That's a necessary part of the pilgrimage.
It is. However, they will not be removed forever. The essential point is the final outcome. Their position, their status as a citizen of Zion is fixed.
So the security is positional, not experiential.
Exactly. They are fixed and firm, like Mount Zion itself, the physical structure David worked so hard to establish. Neither death nor the final judgment has the ability to cast them out from their place of communion,
They are destined for a throne of blessedness forever.
and admitted as permanent members of God's household, enjoying that sound and sure rest in the heavenly Jerusalem.
Let's bring in that nautical image from the sources. It captures this stability so beautifully.
The analogy is of a sturdy ship anchored in a deep harbor. The ship will rock and sway and creak with the surface winds and the chopping waves.
Those are the trials of life, the temporary shakings.
Right, but the vessel cannot be drifted out to sea or wrecked because its anchor holds fast to the solid foundation of the harbor floor. The upright person is anchored to Christ, the true holy hill.
They feel the movement, but the foundation remains secure.
That's it.
This stability, however, brings us back to that critical final phrase. That guarantee is reserved strictly for the one that doeth these things.
This is the necessary final challenge. The promise is not awarded to those who intellectually agree with righteousness, who read about it or hear sermons about it or even talk eloquently about it.
It is solely for the honest and sincere doer.
This active, consistent obedience is the undeniable, necessary proof of the vital principle of grace within.
If we claim the root of grace, we must produce the fruit of righteousness. If that fruit is consistently lacking, the claim is false.
The sources are unrelenting on this. A mighty talker or someone relying on a mere outside formality of worship will not stand the trial when the storms come.
We have to move beyond just talking about doing good.
We have to make it consistently apparent that we have been doing good. This act of righteousness, flowing from a justified heart, is the only thing that proves our title to rest in the holy hill of the Lord.
It confirms that we are being conformed to the image of Jesus, the perfect man who fulfilled this law.
Precisely.
That wraps up our deep dive into Psalm 15. We have seen that the spiritual qualifications for abiding in God's presence are not hidden in some esoteric rituals. They are mirrored precisely in the practical, daily details of life.
From how we police our own ears against gossip to how we manage our financial commitments even when they hurt.
This psalm functions, as the sources say, as fire for the gold, testing the purity of our profession.
It does. And since the holiness described here is wrought in all his people by the Holy Ghost, we shouldn't focus on the impossible question, how do I earn this rest through these actions?
That's the wrong question.
It's the wrong question. Instead, we should face the reality of our state and ask ourselves, does the visible movement of my outer hands, my walk, my work, and my word confirm that the inner clock has truly been tuned by divine grace?
A question that requires deep reflection and persistent effort every single day. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into what it means to be a true citizen of Zion. Until next time.